Hello, friend. Welcome to Science for Sleep. Whether you are returning tonight or arriving here for the first time, this is a quiet place to slow down, learn something gentle, and let the day slowly loosen its hold. Tonight, we are looking at watermelon. It is one of the simplest fruits to recognize. A dark green rind, a pale layer just beneath it, a wide center of red, pink, yellow, or orange flesh, a scatter of black seeds, or sometimes only soft white seed coats, and inside all of it, a cool rush of juice that seems almost too clear and easy to explain. Watermelon feels like it should be simple, because most of us meet it after all the hard work is finished. It is already cut into wedges. It is already cold from the refrigerator. It is already sitting on a plate, or in a bowl, or on a summer table, where the rind slowly gathers beads of water. But the fruit itself is not simple. A watermelon is the swollen fruit of a flowering vine. Its scientific name is Citrullus lanatus. It belongs to the gourd family, the same broad plant family that includes cucumbers, pumpkins, squash, gourds, and many kinds of melons. That family connection is easier to see if you picture the plant before harvest. Not a tree, not a tall bush, but a low vine spreading across warm soil, with rough leaves, curling tendrils, yellow flowers, and heavy fruits resting on the ground. The watermelon slice is only the final page of that longer plant story. Its rind is not just a shell. Its flesh is not just flavored water. Its seeds are not random specks left behind inside the fruit. Each part formed because the plant was growing, feeding, flowering, and trying to make the next generation. The leaves gathered sunlight. The roots pulled water and minerals from the soil. The stems carried sugar toward the fruit as it swelled. And the flesh filled with water, pigments, and sweetness inside thousands upon thousands of plant cells. If you enjoy these quiet journeys, you're welcome to subscribe. And if it feels natural, to leave a comment sharing where you're listening from tonight. It helps others find this calm corner of science, one sleepy listener at a time. What makes watermelon especially interesting is that the fruit we know today is both natural and deeply changed by humans. That may sound like a contradiction at first, but it is one of the most important ideas in the story. Watermelon was not invented in a modern laboratory. It did not appear suddenly as a perfect red supermarket fruit. Its older relatives grew from African plant lineages, in landscapes where heat, dry seasons, animals, seeds, and stored water all mattered. Some ancient and wild forms were not sweet like the watermelon we eat now. Some had pale flesh. Some were bitter. Some were valued more for their seeds than for their watery center. Over thousands of years, people kept noticing small differences. One fruit was less bitter. One fruit had more pleasant flesh. One fruit was larger. One fruit had a stronger rind. One fruit had a deeper color inside. When people saved seeds from the fruits they preferred, they quietly changed the odds for the next generation of plants. That is the slow power of selection. Not one dramatic moment, not a single inventor, but many hands, many fields, many seasons, and many choices made again and again. The watermelon became sweeter. Its flesh became more colorful. Its size increased. Its rind became useful not only to the plant, but also to farmers, sellers, and families carrying the fruit home. Even the seedless watermelons found in many stores today come from a careful breeding story about chromosomes, which are the tiny instruction bundles inside living cells. That story is not the same as saying the fruit is fake. It is still a living plant product. It still begins with flowers. It still depends on pollen. It still grows from a vine in soil, sunlight, heat, and water. So the quiet question tonight is not simply whether watermelon is natural. The better question is how a wild, water-filled fruit became the crisp, sweet, colorful melon so many people recognize. To answer that, it helps to begin with what a watermelon actually is, not in a grocery store, but in the life of the plant itself. The cut face of a watermelon gives the eye several clear layers to follow. Green skin on the outside, a firmer pale band underneath, soft-colored flesh toward the center, seeds or seed coats scattered through the part people usually eat. In plant terms, all of those parts belong to one transformed flower. A watermelon begins with a small yellow flower on a vine. Inside the female flower is an ovary, a tiny structure at the base of the bloom. In everyday speech, ovary usually sounds like an animal word, but plants have ovaries too. A plant ovary is the part of the flower that holds ovules. Ovules are small structures that can become seeds after fertilization. When pollen reaches the female part of the flower and fertilization happens, the ovary begins to change. Its walls thicken. Its inner tissues expand. The small flower that lasted only a short time becomes the starting point for a fruit that may grow heavy enough to rest on the soil. This is what botanists mean when they say a fruit is the mature ovary of a flower. That definition includes obvious fruits like apples, peaches, grapes, and watermelons. It also includes foods people often treat like vegetables, such as cucumbers, squash, pumpkins, and tomatoes. The kitchen and the plant do not always sort things the same way. A cook may group foods by flavor, meal, or habit. A botanist groups them by how the plant makes them. Watermelon belongs to a plant family called Cucurbitaceae. That family name is a little long, so it helps to think of the familiar members. Cucumbers climb or trail with curling tendrils. Pumpkins grow on coarse vines and make hard-rinded fruits. Squash can form long, round, smooth, ridged, soft-skinned, or hard-skinned varieties. Cantaloupes carry netted rinds and sweet orange flesh. Gourds may dry into hard shells that people have used as cups, containers, tools, and ornaments. Watermelon sits among these relatives because it grows from a similar kind of vine and forms a similar kind of fruit. The special fruit type is called a pepo. A pepo is a fleshy fruit with a firm outer rind, usually found in the gourd family. The word may sound technical, but the structure is easy to picture. A pumpkin is a pepo. A cucumber is a pepo. A cantaloupe is a pepo. A watermelon is a pepo, on a larger, juicier scale. The thick outside is part of the fruit wall. The softer inside is part of the same fruit wall, changed into flesh. Near the center, the seeds formed from ovules that were held inside the flower before the fruit began to swell. This means the rind and the red flesh are related tissues. They are different zones of the same organ. The outer zone becomes firmer, greener, and tougher. The inner zone becomes softer, wetter, and sweeter. Between them is the pale rind layer, which has less sweetness than the center, but still belongs to the fruit. That pale part can look like a border, as if it separates the edible fruit from the protective covering. In the plant's body, it is part of the continuous structure. The change from rind to flesh happens gradually, as cells differ in color, texture, water content, and sugar level. A watermelon slice can make these layers look neatly arranged because a knife cuts across them in one clean plane. On the vine, they formed slowly as living cells divided, enlarged, and filled. The skin developed pigments and toughness. The inner tissue gained water. The seed spaces formed around developing seeds. The whole fruit expanded from a small flower ovary into something that could weigh several kilograms. Some watermelons stay small enough to fit easily in one hand. Others grow large enough that a person lifts them with both arms. The basic structure remains the same. Flower tissue becomes fruit wall. Ovules become seeds. The rind protects the flesh. The flesh surrounds the seeds. That simple chain is the quiet architecture behind every slice. Once watermelon is seen this way, it becomes less like a container filled with juice and more like a flower that changed shape over time. The heavy fruit on the soil is connected to a living vine that had to gather sunlight, move water, build sugar, open flowers, and support a growing pepo until it was ready. Across a warm field, a watermelon plant spreads close to the ground. Its stems do not rise into a woody trunk. They stretch outward as soft green vines, sometimes several meters long, with rough leaves spaced along the length. The fruit rests where the vine can support it most easily, on the soil itself. Before the fruit gains its weight, the plant builds a broad working body around it. Roots grow into the upper layers of soil, where warmth, air, and moisture are easiest to reach. A main stem pushes outward from the young plant. Side stems branch away from it. Leaves open above the soil like small solar panels, with wide surfaces that catch light through the day. Curled tendrils grow near the leaf joints. In many plants of the gourd family, these tendrils can wrap around nearby stems, grasses, fences, or other supports. Watermelon vines usually trail along the ground, so the tendrils often lie against soil or nearby growth, but they still show the family habit of reaching and curling. The yellow flowers appear along this low green network. Some flowers produce pollen. Other flowers hold the tiny ovary that can become a fruit. The watermelon begins as a small swelling behind one of those female flowers. From that point on, the whole vine helps feed it. The leaves do the main sugar-making work. Inside each leaf are tiny green structures called chloroplasts. Chloroplasts contain chlorophyll, the green pigment that helps plants capture light energy. Through tiny pores on the leaf surface, called stomata, carbon dioxide from the air enters the leaf. Water arrives from the roots. Using sunlight as energy, the leaf combines carbon dioxide and water to make simple sugars. Oxygen is released back into the air. This process is photosynthesis, and it is the quiet engine behind the fruit's sweetness. A watermelon does not become sweet because sugar appears only inside the fruit. Much of that sugar begins in the leaves. After sugars are made, they move through a living transport tissue called phloem. Phloem carries dissolved sugars from places that make them, such as mature leaves, toward places that need them, such as growing stems, roots, flowers, and fruit. During fruit growth, the developing watermelon becomes a strong destination for this moving sugar. Plant scientists sometimes call that kind of destination a sink. The word simply means a place where the plant is sending and storing materials. The fruit draws in sugar because its cells are dividing, enlarging, and filling. Water reaches the fruit through a different transport tissue called xylem. Xylem is made of tiny tubes that carry water and dissolved minerals upward from the roots. The pull begins partly because leaves lose water vapor through their stomata. As water leaves the leaf surface, more water is drawn upward from below, like a long, thin chain moving through the plant. That movement helps bring moisture from the soil into stems, leaves, and growing fruit. The water inside a watermelon is therefore connected to the soil water the roots found earlier. The sugar inside the flesh is connected to sunlight that touched the leaves. The minerals in the cells came from the soil solution around the roots. The weight of the fruit is spread across the vine's daily work. A young watermelon may be small enough to hide beneath leaves. As days pass, its cells expand, and its rind begins to firm. The fruit becomes a storage place for water, sugar, pigments, and developing seeds. Its round or oval body is the most visible part of the plant, but it is fed by tissues that may stretch far beyond it. A single fruit can draw support from many leaves at once. If leaves are damaged by disease, insects, drought, or rough handling, the fruit may still grow, but its size and sweetness can suffer. If roots sit in soil that is too dry, the supply of water becomes limited. If the vine grows in weak light, sugar production slows. The watermelon is therefore a record of the season around it. Warm days, working leaves, active roots, open flowers, moving water, transported sugar. All of these become part of the fruit, even though only the fruit is usually carried away from the field. This helps explain how a watermelon grows large and sweet. A wider story begins with why this plant lineage became so closely tied to water, heat, and the pressure of dry landscapes. Long before a watermelon reached a kitchen counter, its relatives grew in African landscapes where warmth shaped almost every part of plant life. The genus Citrullus includes plants connected to dry or seasonally dry places. One relative, the citron melon, Citrullus amarus, is associated with southern Africa. Another relative, the colocynth, Citrullus colocynthis, grows in arid regions of North Africa and Western Asia, where its small round fruits can survive in harsh open ground. These plants help show why watermelon belongs to a lineage where heat, tough rinds, and stored water all matter. A dry landscape does not mean a place with no rain at all. Many warm regions have rainfall that arrives in certain seasons, then disappears for long stretches. A vine may grow quickly when the soil is warm and damp. Flowers may open during a favorable window. Fruits may form while the plant has enough water to build them. Then the dry season returns, and any seed that survives has a better chance of carrying the plant forward. In that setting, a fruit is more than something sweet. It is a shelter for seeds. While seeds are still forming, they need protection from drying, insects, heat, and damage. The fruit wall surrounds them as they develop. In watermelon, that wall becomes the rind and the flesh. The outer part becomes firm. The inner part can hold water, dissolve sugars, minerals, pigments, and other compounds inside living cells. A thick rind helps slow the loss of moisture. It can also protect the inside from scraping against soil, from small animals, and from the pressure of the fruit's own weight. A fruit lying on open ground has to endure contact with dust, sand, stones, insects, and sudden changes in heat. The rind gives the seeds time. That is one reason water-rich flesh makes sense in this plant story. The water inside the fruit is not there because people like cold slices on summer afternoons. That human use came much later. For the plant, water-rich tissue can help keep the developing seeds in a stable place while the fruit matures. It can also make the fruit noticeable to animals once the seeds are ready to move. In many fleshy fruits, animals eat the fruit and carry seeds away from the parent plant. The exact seed-moving partners for ancient watermelon relatives are difficult to name with certainty, because old ecosystems do not leave simple records of every bite and every scattered seed. Still, the general pattern is clear. A fleshy fruit can protect seeds while they grow, then help them reach a new patch of soil. Watermelon's older relatives were part of that broader plant strategy. Some fruits may have been opened by animals. Some may have split, rotted, or dried on the ground. Some may have been carried by people once humans entered the story. Each path could move seeds away from the vine that made them. Distance matters because seedlings growing directly under the parent plant compete for the same light, water, and minerals. A seed moved several meters or much farther may land in a place with less competition. It may also reach soil disturbed by hooves, paws, digging, flooding, or human activity. Even a small change in where a seed rests can change its chance of sprouting. Water inside the fruit could also make wild melons useful before they became sweet in the modern sense. In hot regions, a round fruit with stored moisture would be noticeable. People and animals do not need a fruit to taste like dessert before it becomes useful. Seeds can be eaten. Moist flesh can be chewed. A rind can make the fruit easier to carry or store for a short time. Some wild or semi-wild melons had bitter flesh, and bitter compounds are common defensive tools in the gourd family. Bitterness can discourage animals from eating a fruit too early, before the seeds inside are mature. It can also make a plant less appealing to some grazers. That matters because the plant's goal is seed survival, not sweetness for human taste. The modern watermelon carries a memory of this older design. Its size, rind, water-filled flesh, and seed spaces make more sense when they are placed back into hot ground, seasonal rain, and the slow work of protecting seeds. A water-rich fruit can still be tough. A useful fruit can still be bitter. An ancient melon can belong to the same family story, while looking and tasting very different from the red slice people know today. The older melon story becomes clearer when the familiar red slice is set aside for a moment. A wild citrullus fruit could be round, tough-skinned, pale inside, and difficult to enjoy raw. Its flesh may have carried a sharp bitterness, rather than the clean sweetness people expect from watermelon today. That bitterness was part of the plant's chemistry. In the gourd family, many wild relatives can produce bitter compounds called cucurbitacins. These compounds can make leaves, stems, or fruits taste harsh to animals. For a plant growing in open, dry country, that chemical defense can matter. A fruit eaten too early loses seeds before they are fully ready. A vine that protects its developing fruit has a better chance of leaving mature seeds behind. Bitterness, then, is not a strange accident. It is one possible way a plant controls when, and by whom, its tissues are eaten. Modern watermelon has been selected in the opposite direction for human taste. Its flesh is mild. Its center is often red. Its sugar level is high enough that people treat it as dessert, snack, or cold summer food. That familiar version can make the older forms hard to picture. Yet ancient evidence shows that the watermelon lineage was already connected to people long before the fruit looked like a supermarket melon. Ancient genome work has examined citrullus seeds up to about 6,000 years old from Libya. Other ancient seeds, about 3,300 years old, have been studied from Sudan. A genome is the full set of instructions carried in living cells. Even after thousands of years, small pieces of ancient genetic material can sometimes remain inside preserved seeds. Those pieces can help compare old plants with modern relatives. The Libyan material appears closer to seed-use melons than to the sweet red dessert watermelon most people know. That matters because seed-use melons are grown mainly for their seeds. In parts of Africa, related cucurbit seeds have been valued as food in their own right. They can be dried, cracked, roasted, ground, or cooked into soups and sauces. Their value comes from stored fat, protein, and energy packed inside the seed. For early people living with seasonal plants, that kind of food would have been practical. Seeds keep better than watery flesh. They travel more easily than large fruits. They can be saved for planting, stored for later meals, or carried from one place to another. This does not mean every ancient citrullus fruit had the same use. The early record is scattered. Seeds survive in dry caves, tombs, and archaeological layers more easily than soft fruit flesh. A rind can decay. A watery center can disappear into the soil. Seeds leave a clearer trace. Evidence suggests that some early people may have valued citrullus plants for seeds before sweetness became the main attraction. That possibility changes the shape of the whole story. Human selection does not need to begin with a perfect fruit. It can begin with small differences that matter in daily life. One plant may produce larger seeds. Another may produce seeds that are easier to remove. A third may grow more reliably after rain. When people gather from useful plants, carry their seeds, and plant or discard them near camps and fields, they begin to change which plants return. Over many generations, even a simple preference can become powerful. A less bitter fruit may be opened more often. A plant with better seeds may be protected. A vine with larger fruit may be noticed. The next season begins with the seeds that people handled, saved, or left in the right place. This is how domestication can start quietly. The plant does not change all at once. A population shifts because certain traits keep getting carried forward. In watermelon, that long process eventually favored sweeter flesh, redder color, larger size, and a texture people wanted to eat fresh. At the beginning, though, the most useful part may have been smaller, harder, and easier to keep. Before watermelon became a fruit of cold slices and dripping juice, it may have been a plant remembered for the seeds inside. Inside each seed is a small beginning. A watermelon seed holds a tiny plant embryo, a supply of stored food, and a protective outer coat. The embryo is the part that can grow into a new vine. The stored food helps that young plant begin life before its first leaves can make sugar from sunlight. The seed coat shields the inside from drying, scraping, and small injuries, while the seed waits in soil, sand, storage, or a human hand. Modern eaters often treat watermelon seeds as something to remove. Black seeds may be spit out. White seed coats may be swallowed without much notice. Seedless varieties have made the seed feel like an inconvenience. For early people, a seed could be the most useful part of the plant. A seed is small. It can be dried. It can be carried in a pouch, basket, skin bag, or clay vessel. It can survive longer than watery flesh in a hot climate. In the Central Sahara, at a place in Libya called Ouan Muhugiag, ancient citrullus seeds have been recovered from deposits thousands of years old. Some of this material reaches back around 6,000 years. The seeds are small objects, but they carry a large clue. They suggest that people were handling plants from the watermelon lineage long before the modern dessert fruit was fully recognizable. Some ancient seeds show signs that fit with human use, including damage that may have come from cracking, chewing, or processing. That does not prove every ancient melon was grown mainly for seeds. The evidence points toward a strong possibility in part of the story. Some early citrullus plants may have been valued less for soft, sweet flesh and more for the food packed inside their seeds. That pattern still has living echoes in parts of Africa. Egusi-type melons are grown for seeds rather than juicy pulp. The word egusi is used for seeds from certain cucurbit plants that are eaten in West and Central African cooking. These seeds can be shelled, dried, roasted, ground, or cooked into thick soups and sauces. Their value comes from what the plant stored for its own embryo: fat, protein, minerals, energy that can be kept and used later. A bitter melon with useful seeds could still be worth gathering. A pale-fleshed fruit with a tough rind could still be opened. A plant that returned after seasonal rain could still become familiar to people who knew the landscape well. Practical use can guide selection long before anyone thinks of crop improvement as a plan. People might gather fruits from vines that made larger seeds. They might save seeds that were easier to remove from the flesh. They might favor plants that produced many fruits after a wet season. When useful seeds were carried back to camps, villages, or garden plots, some would be eaten. Others could be dropped, discarded, stored, traded, or planted. A seed dropped near human activity may land in disturbed soil. Disturbed soil can have less plant cover, more light at ground level, and loosened earth where a seedling can push its root downward. A seed planted on purpose gains an even better chance. Over many seasons, the plants growing closest to people are the ones people keep touching. That contact matters. A vine with useful seeds gets noticed. A fruit with less bitterness gets opened. A plant that survives near a settlement leaves more seeds where people can find them again. This is how early cultivation can begin quietly. It may start as gathering. Then it may become protection. Later, it may become planting. Each step changes which seeds are carried forward. Watermelon's long human story did not have to begin with a perfect red center. It could begin with the dry sound of seeds shaken loose from a rind. It could begin with hands sorting small pale seeds from fibrous flesh. It could begin with people saving the useful part of a wild or half-wild melon, because that part could travel through time better than juice. Once seeds were carried, stored, and planted, the plant could move with people. It could enter camps, gardens, fields, river valleys, and trade paths. Eventually, in the dry air of ancient Egypt, watermelon would leave clearer marks in tombs, baskets, paintings, and offerings meant to last far beyond a single harvest. In Egypt, dry air could preserve traces that wetter places often lose. Seeds could survive in baskets. Painted fruits could remain on tomb walls. Carved and painted offerings could show what people placed near the dead, hoping those foods would continue to matter beyond ordinary life. This is why ancient Egypt gives watermelon a clearer shape in human history. The Nile Valley was a narrow green corridor surrounded by desert. Each year, the river brought water, silt, and farming life into a landscape where heat and dryness were always close by. In that setting, a water-rich fruit would have been easy to value. It could be carried from fields. It could be cut and shared. It could offer moisture, seeds, and sweetness during hot weather. The evidence from Egypt does not let us taste those fruits directly. A painting cannot tell us the exact sugar level. A seed cannot show the sound of a rind being cut open. Still, these clues can show that watermelon had moved beyond casual gathering and into a more settled place in human food culture. Some Egyptian tomb images show large, striped or elongated fruits placed on trays with other foods. The shape matters. Many wild melons are round and small. Some ancient Egyptian images show longer, oblong fruits, closer in outline to cultivated watermelons. That does not mean the fruits were identical to modern supermarket varieties. It does suggest that people were already choosing and growing forms that looked more like managed crops than wild ground fruits. One important clue comes from Egyptian imagery, dated to about 4,360 years before the present. By that time, watermelon pulp appears to have been eaten as a dessert food. That detail is meaningful because dessert use points toward a fruit that was pleasant enough to eat fresh. A bitter, pale, seed-focused melon can be useful. A fruit served with sweet foods in a tomb scene suggests a different relationship. It suggests flesh that people wanted, not merely seeds they could store. Tombs preserved more than paintings. Watermelon seeds have also been found in ancient Egyptian burial contexts. The tomb of Tutankhamun, the young pharaoh buried in the 14th century BC, contained many objects chosen for the afterlife, including food remains and plant materials. Watermelon seeds are part of that wider record of preserved foods. The presence of seeds in tombs does not reveal exactly how every fruit tasted. It does show that watermelon was known, handled, and valued enough to accompany people into one of the most carefully prepared spaces in Egyptian life. Burial goods were never random. They could include bread, beer, meat, fruits, oils, flowers, and seeds. They reflected nourishment, status, ritual, and memory. When a plant appears in that kind of setting, it has become more than a wild vine in the landscape. It has entered the human world of meals, storage, gardens, offerings, and belief. The Nile helped make that possible. Fields near the river could support crops in a region where rainfall was limited. Irrigation channels and basin farming allowed people to guide water over land after the annual flood. Farmers grew cereals such as wheat and barley. They cultivated flax, grapes, dates, figs, and vegetables. Within that farming world, watermelon could fit as a warm season crop with a useful body of stored moisture. The fruit's older African lineage was still present inside it. Its rind, seeds, and water-filled flesh still came from the same plant structures. Human use was adding another layer. People were choosing which fruits to keep, which seeds to plant, which forms to carry, and which foods were valuable enough to paint or place in tombs. By ancient Egyptian times, watermelon had crossed a quiet threshold. It was visible in art. It was present in burial spaces. It was connected to cultivated life along one of the world's great river valleys. The plant still had a long way to travel before becoming the crisp, red, seedless fruit, common in many stores today. Yet the direction had changed. People were no longer only encountering citrulous plants in the landscape. They were bringing them into human order, and every act of choosing gave the fruit a slightly different future. A chosen seed carries a quiet instruction into the following season. If people save seeds from fruits they prefer, the next crop begins with those particular plants as its parents. That simple act can slowly shift an entire population. Domestication works through inherited variation. Variation means that individuals of the same plant species are not perfectly identical. One vine may produce a fruit with slightly less bitterness. A nearby vine may make larger seeds. Another may form a firmer rind, a softer center, or flesh with a deeper color. When people notice those differences and keep seeds from useful fruits, they give certain traits more chances to appear again. This is artificial selection. Artificial, in this case, does not mean fake. It means shaped by human choice. Natural selection happens when climate, soil, insects, animals, disease, and chance affect which plants survive. Human selection happens when people choose which plants to protect, harvest, eat, store, trade, or plant again. Both work on living variation. Both can change a plant lineage over time. For watermelon, the changes were not limited to one trait. Bitterness could decrease as people favored fruits that were easier to eat. Sweetness could increase as fruits with more sugar were chosen for fresh flesh. Size could grow as larger fruits became more useful for sharing, selling, or storing. Texture could shift toward flesh that felt softer, crisper, and more pleasant in the mouth. Rind strength could matter because a fruit with a tougher outside could survive handling better. Seed traits could change too, especially if people valued larger seeds, fewer hard seeds, or seeds that were easier to remove. Disease resistance also mattered. even before people had words for fungi, bacteria, or plant viruses. A vine that stayed healthy long enough to set fruit would leave more seed than a vine that collapsed early. The history of watermelon domestication is still complex. The plant belongs to an African lineage, and its closest relatives point strongly toward African origins. Preserved citrulous seeds from places such as Libya and Sudan show that people were handling these plants thousands of years ago. Ancient Egypt gives signs of sweeter, cultivated fruit by more than 4,000 years before the present. Still, the exact path from wild melon to desert watermelon was not a single straight road. Different citrulous forms likely moved through different regions, uses, and human groups. Some were connected to seed use. Others were connected to watery flesh. Over time, the lines that led toward modern watermelon became more useful as fresh fruit. Domestication, breeding, and modern genetic modification describe different levels of human involvement. Domestication is the long process by which a wild or semi-wild plant becomes adapted to life with people. Breeding is the more focused practice of crossing or selecting plants to strengthen certain traits. GMO refers to a modern method where genetic material is changed with laboratory tools. Most of watermelon's long transformation happened through selection and breeding across many generations. A farmer did not need to know about genes to affect genes. A gene is a stretch of DNA that helps control a trait, such as pigment, growth, bitterness, or disease response. DNA is the instruction material inside living cells. When people saved seeds from preferred fruits, they were choosing future instructions without seeing the instructions themselves. Each planting season became a filter. A basket of seeds might contain many possible futures. The ones placed into good soil near people had the best chance to grow. The vines that made useful fruits were more likely to be remembered. Their seeds were more likely to be kept dry, carried safely, or planted near water. Over hundreds and then thousands of years, small preferences could become visible changes. A wild fruit with pale bitter flesh could give way to cultivated forms with milder taste. A fruit grown mainly for seeds could become a fruit valued for its center. A vine from hot African landscapes could become a crop known across river valleys, gardens, farms, and markets. The easiest sign of this long rebuilding waits inside every cut watermelon. Color records part of the journey. The red center that now feels so ordinary comes from plant chemistry and from the generations of people who kept choosing fruits that looked more inviting when opened. A freshly cut watermelon can look almost painted from the inside. Some fruits open to a deep red center. Others are pink, golden yellow, orange, or nearly pale cream. Those colors come from pigments, which are natural compounds that absorb and reflect light. In plants, pigments help create the colors of leaves, flowers, roots, and fruits. One important pigment family is called carotenoids. Carotenoids are found across many familiar foods. They help give carrots their orange color. They help make pumpkins look bright and warm. They also help give tomatoes their red color when they ripen. In red watermelon, the main pigment is lycopene. Lycopene is a red carotenoid. It collects inside the fruit's flesh as the watermelon develops and ripens. When light hits the cut surface, Lycopene reflects back the red wavelengths that the eye sees. That color can feel like a simple sign of summer, but inside the fruit, it is chemistry arranged inside living cells. The cells of watermelon flesh are full of water, sugars, acids, and dissolved compounds. As the fruit matures, some cells build up more pigment than others. A red-fleshed watermelon has a pigment pathway that strongly favors lycopene. A yellow watermelon follows a different balance of pigments. An orange watermelon has its own mix. These colors are real watermelon colors. They come from inherited differences in the fruit's chemistry, shaped by breeding and selection over time. A yellow watermelon may surprise someone who has only seen red slices in a grocery store. Its color can look unusual at first, but yellow-fleshed watermelons have been grown and eaten for a long time. They can be sweet, juicy, and fully ripe, while carrying less red lycopene than the common red types. Orange-fleshed varieties also exist, with pigment patterns that sit between yellow and red in appearance. Color alone does not make a watermelon good or bad. It tells part of the fruit's development story. Ancient evidence suggests that some older citrullus forms were likely much paler than modern dessert watermelons. The red center so many people expect today was strengthened through selection. People opening fruits across many generations would have noticed color immediately. A deeper red center could signal ripeness. It could suggest sweetness. It could make the fruit more appealing when cut and shared. Even before people understood pigments, cells, or genes, they could remember which fruits looked best and tasted best. Seeds from those fruits had a better chance of being saved. That is how a visible preference can become a biological direction. The same pattern appears in other crops. Tomatoes were selected for color, size, flavor, and firmness. Carrots were shaped into many colors before orange became the most common type in many places. Pumpkins and squash show wide color differences because their pigment pathways vary. Watermelon belongs to this larger human habit of choosing plants, partly by what the eye can read. A fruit with bright flesh stands out. A clean red center is easy to recognize at a market stall. A slice that looks rich and ripe can influence which melon is praised, bought, planted, or remembered. Over time, that attention can push a crop towards stronger and more reliable color. Modern watermelon breeding still pays attention to flesh color. Growers and buyers often want a fruit that looks consistent from one harvest to the next. Stores want melons that meet customer expectations. Home gardeners may choose varieties for curiosity, flavor, seed type, or unusual color. A red watermelon, a yellow watermelon, and an orange watermelon can all belong to the same crop story while showing different pigment choices inside the flesh. The red interior became common because it fit human senses well. It gave people a visible sign to connect with ripeness and sweetness. It made the opened fruit look generous. It turned plant chemistry into a signal that could be seen across a table. Yet color could only carry watermelon part of the way. A bright fruit might catch attention, but the lasting desire came from what happened when people tasted it, when bitterness faded and sugar began to define the flesh. Taste gave people another way to read the fruit. A red center could invite attention, but sweetness decided whether a fruit was worth remembering. Inside watermelon flesh, sweetness comes from dissolved sugars. The main sugars include glucose, fructose, and sucrose. Glucose has a simple, clean sweetness. Fructose often tastes sweeter to the tongue than glucose. Sucrose is the familiar table sugar found in many plants, including sugar cane, sugar beet, and ripe fruits. In watermelon, these sugars are dissolved in the juice inside the fruit cells. When the flesh is cut or bitten, the cells break and release that sweet liquid across the tongue. A grower can measure part of this sweetness with a scale called Brix. Brix measures soluble solids in juice. Soluble means able to dissolve. In fruit juice, many of those dissolved solids are sugars, so Brix is often used as a practical estimate of sweetness. A reading of 10 degrees Brix means that about 10 grams of dissolved solids are present in 100 grams of juice. Watermelons can vary, but many good eating types fall around 10 to 12 degrees Brix, with some especially sweet fruits measuring higher. That number does not tell the whole story of flavor. Acids, aroma compounds, texture, temperature, and ripeness all change how sweet a fruit seems. A cold slice can taste cleaner than a warm one. A crisp slice can seem fresher than a soft one with the same sugar level. A fruit with watery, weak flesh may disappoint even when some sugar is present. Still, Brix gives a useful window into the chemistry people have been selecting for across generations. The older melon lineage likely included fruits with far less pleasant flesh. In many members of the gourd family, bitter compounds can protect plant tissues from being eaten. These compounds are called cucurbitacins. They can taste intensely harsh even in small amounts. Wild cucumbers, gourds, and related plants may carry more bitterness than cultivated types. For a plant, that bitterness can help defend leaves, stems, or immature fruits from animals. For a person choosing food, bitterness can make a fruit less useful as fresh flesh. Domestication slowly pushed some watermelon lines away from that harsher chemistry. A person opening several fruits would notice differences. One might be bitter enough to reject. One might be watery but bland. One might have a trace of sweetness near the center. Seeds from the better fruit had a stronger chance of being saved, carried, planted, or traded. Across many growing seasons, those choices could reduce bitterness and increase sweetness in the plants people kept close. Ripening added another layer. As a watermelon matures on the vine, its flesh changes in several ways. Sugars build, pigments deepen, cells enlarge and hold more juice. The rind becomes firmer. Aromas shift in subtle ways. Inside the fruit, enzymes help manage chemical changes. An enzyme is a tiny biological tool that speeds up a reaction in living cells. Different enzymes help break down, build, or move compounds as the fruit develops. The final taste depends on how those processes line up before harvest. Watermelon does not continue to sweeten in the same strong way as some fruits after it is picked. A banana can ripen noticeably on a counter. A peach can soften and become more fragrant after harvest. A watermelon depends heavily on reaching good maturity while still attached to the vine. That is why harvest timing matters so much. Growers look for signs such as a creamy yellow ground spot where the fruit touched the soil. a drying tendril near the fruit stem, a duller rind surface, and a heavy feel for its size. None of these signs is perfect alone. Together, they help judge whether the fruit has gathered enough sugar, water, and texture before being cut from the vine. Sweetness changed watermelon's relationship with people. A seed crop can be useful. A water-rich fruit can be practical. A sweet, cooling fruit becomes desirable in a different way. It is shared more easily. It is carried into markets. It is remembered after the season ends. Human preference kept pressing the crop toward flesh that tasted mild, sweet, and generous. Yet sweetness reaches the listener's tongue only after the fruit's structure gives way. The next part of the experience is physical. The clean break of water-filled cells under the teeth. A ripe watermelon gives way with a clean, wet snap. The knife slides through the rind, then meets softer flesh. A bite breaks the surface, and juice moves across the tongue almost at once. That feeling comes from the way the fruit is built at the cell level. Watermelon flesh is made of plant cells. A cell is the smallest living unit of the plant. Each one is tiny, but together they make the colored center of the fruit. Plant cells have outer walls made mostly from cellulose, a strong material that helps plants hold their shape. Cellulose is also found in stems, leaves, cotton fibers, and wood, though watermelon flesh contains it in a much softer form. Inside those walls is a thin cell membrane. The membrane controls what moves into and out of the cell. Within the cell is a large space called a vacuole. A vacuole acts like an inner storage chamber. In many fruit cells, the vacuole takes up most of the space. It can hold water, sugars, acids, pigments, minerals, and other dissolved compounds. In watermelon, those vacuoles are especially important because the edible flesh contains so much water. By weight, watermelon flesh is usually around 90% water or a little more. That number explains part of the juiciness, although the structure matters just as much as the amount. A glass of water and a slice of watermelon can contain the same kind of molecule, H2O, but the experience is different because the fruit holds water inside living tissue. The water is divided among millions of tiny cells. Each cell has its own wall. Each wall holds pressure. That pressure is called turgor pressure. Turgor means the outward push of water inside a plant cell. When a plant cell has enough water, the vacuole swells and presses the cell contents outward against the wall. The wall resists that push. Together, the pressure and the wall make the tissue feel firm. This is why fresh lettuce stands upright, why a celery stalk snaps, and why a good watermelon feels crisp instead of limp. Water moves into plant cells because dissolved substances inside the cell attract water through the membrane. This movement is called osmosis. Osmosis means water moves across a thin barrier toward the side with more dissolved material. Inside watermelon cells, sugars and other compounds help draw water in and keep the cells full. As the fruit matures on the vine, water arrives through the plant's transport tissues, and the cells of the flesh enlarge. The flesh becomes a mass of pressurized, water-rich chambers. When a tooth cuts into the fruit, many cell walls break. Their vacuoles release liquid. The juice that reaches the mouth is the combined contents of many broken cells. carrying water, sugars, acids, pigments, and aroma compounds together. This is why watermelon can feel both solid and flowing. Before the bite, the water is organized inside cells. After the bite, that order opens. Freshness depends on that structure remaining strong. A watermelon that has been cut for too long can begin to lose its clean texture. Cells break. Juice leaks out. The surface becomes wet in a different way, with liquid pooling instead of staying held inside the flesh. An overripe watermelon can become soft or mealy because the walls between cells weaken. Enzymes inside the fruit help change cell walls during ripening. At the right point, those changes make the flesh tender enough to eat. Past that point, the structure can loosen too much. Bruising can cause a similar change in one area. If the fruit is dropped, squeezed, or stacked under too much weight, cells can rupture before anyone cuts it. The rind may still look whole, while the inside has already lost some of its crispness. Temperature changes matter too. A chilled slice often feels firmer and cleaner because cold slows some breakdown processes and makes the juice feel sharper against the tongue. The familiar pleasure of watermelon comes from this balance. The cells need enough water to burst. The walls need enough strength to hold pressure. The flesh needs enough ripeness to taste sweet without collapsing into softness. That balance is delicate for such a heavy fruit. A center filled with pressurized water needs protection from the field, from insects, from drying air, and from the weight of the fruit itself. The hard green rind begins to look less like a leftover edge and more like the boundary that makes the whole watery structure possible. That hard green boundary carries more of the story than it first seems to hold. Around the watery center is a layered fruit wall. On the outside, the skin is usually green, sometimes striped, mottled, dark, or pale, depending on the variety. Beneath that surface is the firmer white or pale green rind. Closer to the center, that pale tissue gradually gives way to the colored flesh. A knife makes the change look sudden. Inside the fruit, the layers are connected. They all grew from the wall of the flower's ovary. After pollination began the process of fruit formation. The rind is part of the same transformed plant organ as the sweet center. Its outer cells develop toughness. Its inner cells hold less sugar and less pigment than the red, pink, yellow, or orange flesh. That is why the rind tastes mild, crisp, and faintly green compared with the center. In some food traditions, this pale part is saved. Watermelon rind can be pickled with vinegar, sugar, salt, and spices. It can also be cooked in stir-fries, preserves, curries, or stews. The part many people leave behind still contains plant tissue that grew as part of the fruit. For the plant, the rind's first job is protection. A watermelon develops on or very near the soil. It may rest against sand, clay, straw, plastic mulch, or rough field ground for weeks. The surface has to face sunlight, insects, fungi, bacteria, rubbing leaves, shifting soil, and the pressure of the fruit's own weight. A thin, weak covering would leave the watery center exposed too easily. The green outer skin helps shield the fruit from direct damage. Its waxy surface can slow water loss. The firmer rind beneath it spreads pressure across the fruit wall. Together, these layers help protect the seeds while they mature inside. This matters because watermelon flesh is heavy with water. A fruit that is around 90% water carries a soft interior inside a body that may weigh several kilograms. Some small personal watermelons weigh only a few pounds. Large field watermelons can weigh more than 20 pounds. Competition fruits can grow far larger under special care, though those extreme melons are outside normal grocery production. Even an ordinary melon has to hold its shape from flower stage to harvest. The rind helps make that possible. Human agriculture later gave this plant structure another role. Farmers need to cut watermelons from the vine, lift them, place them in bins, move them by truck, unload them, stack them, and display them. Every step puts pressure on the fruit. A weak rind can crack. A bruised area can turn soft. A fruit with poor handling strength may look fine in the field and fail before it reaches a buyer. Because of that, breeders pay attention to rind strength. They may select for thickness, toughness, disease resistance, rind pattern, and the ability to survive shipping. A watermelon grown for a nearby farm stand can have different demands than a melon traveling hundreds of miles to a supermarket. The rind must help the fruit remain whole through heat, movement, vibration, and stacking. This creates a trade-off. More rind can make a fruit stronger. More rind can also mean less sweet flesh for the same total size. People usually buy watermelon for the center, so breeders and growers balance protection with eating quality. A rind that is too thin may damage easily. A rind that is too thick may disappoint someone expecting a generous red interior. The best market fruit has to satisfy the vine, the field, the truck, the store, and the person who cuts it open. That is why the rind is easy to overlook and difficult to replace. It begins as plant protection. It becomes part of farming. It shapes shipping. It affects how much edible flesh reaches the table. The green edge around a slice is a record of biology meeting handling. Long before that edge hardens, the fruit has to begin as a small swelling behind a yellow flower, and its future depends on pollen reaching the right place at the right time. A watermelon flower is small compared with the fruit it can begin. Its petals are yellow, soft, and open for a short time on the vine. On a warm morning, the flowers may sit low among rough green leaves, close to the soil, where the stems spread outward. Some of these flowers are male, others are female. The difference can be seen before the flower ever opens fully. A male flower sits on a slender stem and produces pollen. Pollen is the fine powder that carries the plant's male reproductive cells. A female flower has a tiny swelling behind the petals. That swelling is the ovary. If development goes well, it can become the watermelon. Inside the female flower, ovules wait within the ovary. After fertilization, those ovules can become seeds. At the center of the female flower is a sticky surface called the stigma. The stigma receives pollen. For a watermelon plant, getting pollen to that surface is a small event, with large consequences. Watermelon pollen is relatively heavy and sticky. Wind does very little of the work. The vine depends mostly on insects that visit flowers. Honeybees are often important in commercial fields. Bumblebees and some wild bees can also visit watermelon flowers. A bee enters a male flower looking for nectar or pollen. As it moves across the flower, grains of pollen cling to its body. When the same bee visits a female flower, some pollen can brush onto the stigma. That transfer is pollination. The process may sound simple, though the timing is narrow. Watermelon flowers usually open in the morning. They are most useful to pollinators for only a limited part of the day. Cool weather, rain, strong wind, low bee activity, or poor field conditions can reduce the number of visits. A female flower needs enough pollen to support normal fruit development. One visit may help, but several good visits can be better. Pollination is connected to fruit set. Fruit set means the flower successfully begins growing into a fruit that the plant keeps. After pollen lands on the stigma, a pollen tube grows down into the flower. This tube is a tiny pathway that carries male reproductive cells toward the ovules. Fertilization begins seed development. As seeds begin to form, chemical signals inside the plant help the ovary grow. Cells divide. Tissues enlarge. The young fruit becomes more than a swelling behind a flower. It becomes a small watermelon with a future rind, flesh, and seed spaces. Pollination quality can affect shape. A well-pollinated fruit usually develops more evenly. Poor pollination can leave parts of the fruit with weaker growth signals. The result may be a misshapen melon, a smaller fruit, or internal problems that only appear after cutting. This is because the growing seeds help guide the growth of the surrounding fruit tissue. The fruit is responding to what happened at the flower stage. Farmers pay attention to this connection. In commercial watermelon production, bee activity can be one of the quiet foundations of the crop. Fields may be planted with pollination in mind. Managed honeybee hives are often placed near watermelon fields during bloom. Growers also watch weather because a cool, cloudy bloom period can reduce insect movement. A field can have healthy vines and still struggle if flowers are not visited often enough. Seedless watermelon makes this process even more interesting. Seedless plants usually do not produce normal fertile pollen. Because of that, fields of seedless watermelon often include pollinizer plants. A pollinizer is a normal seeded watermelon plant, added to provide usable pollen. The seedless plants can still make fruit, but they usually need pollen from these companion plants to start the process properly. This is why a seedless watermelon field may contain more than one kind of watermelon plant growing together. Some plants are there mainly to provide the pollen. Other plants are there to produce the seedless fruit that will be harvested. The whole crop depends on coordination among flowers, bees, vines, and chromosomes. A full watermelon begins with a brief meeting on a yellow flower. Pollen reaches the stigma. A tube grows. Ovules begin their change into seeds. The ovary swells into fruit. That sequence makes seedless watermelons sound almost impossible at first, because fruit formation is so closely tied to seeds. The answer sits deeper inside the plant, in the way its chromosomes are arranged before the flower ever opens. A seedless watermelon still begins like other watermelons. It grows from a flower. It swells from an ovary. It needs pollen to help start normal fruit development. Then, when the fruit is cut open, the hard black seeds are mostly gone. That can make seedless watermelon feel like a trick. The explanation begins inside the cells, with chromosomes. Chromosomes are tiny bundles of genetic instructions. They help guide how a living thing grows, repairs itself, and passes traits to the next generation. In watermelon, those instructions affect rind color, vine growth, fruit shape, flesh color, sweetness, disease resistance, and seed formation. Most ordinary seeded watermelons are diploid. Diploid means the plant has 2 sets of chromosomes in each body cell. In watermelon, that usual diploid number is 22 chromosomes. When the plant makes pollen or egg cells, it has to divide those chromosome sets evenly. Those reproductive cells are called gametes. A gamete is a cell used in reproduction, such as pollen from the male flower part, or an egg cell inside an ovule. The special cell division that makes gametes is called meiosis. Meiosis sorts chromosomes so each gamete receives the right set of instructions. Seedless watermelon changes the sorting problem. Breeders first create a tetraploid watermelon line. Tetraploid means 4 sets of chromosomes. In watermelon, that number is 44 chromosomes. This kind of plant can be made by treating young growing tissue with a compound that affects cell division. The result is a watermelon plant with doubled chromosome sets. That tetraploid plant is then crossed with a normal diploid plant. The tetraploid parent contributes 2 sets of chromosomes. The diploid parent contributes 1 set. The offspring has 3 sets. That plant is called triploid. In watermelon, a triploid plant has 33 chromosomes. It can grow leaves, stems, flowers, and fruit. Its problem appears when it tries to make normal seeds. 3 sets of chromosomes do not pair and separate as neatly as 2 sets during meiosis. The instructions are present, but the sorting becomes uneven. Many reproductive cells end up with missing or extra chromosome pieces. Because of that, the plant has trouble making normal fertile pollen and normal mature seeds. This is the heart of seedless watermelon. The fruit still forms, but seed development does not finish in the usual way. A seedless watermelon field usually includes pollinizer plants. These are normal seeded watermelon plants placed among the seedless ones. Their job is to provide usable pollen. Bees visit the flowers, moving pollen from the pollinizer plants onto the female flowers of the seedless plants. That pollen helps stimulate fruit development. The seedless plant can then grow a watermelon with the familiar rind, flesh, juice, and sweetness, while most of the seeds inside fail to mature into hard black seeds. This is why seedless watermelons are often grown in carefully planned rows or patterns. The field needs the seedless plants that make the crop people want. It also needs pollinizer plants that make the pollen the crop depends on. Bees connect the two. A seedless watermelon, then, is still part of the same flower and fruit process. It still depends on sunlight gathered by leaves. It still pulls water through roots and stems. It still grows from a vine in warm soil. Its unusual feature comes from chromosome number. This is chromosome breeding. A seedless watermelon can come from this breeding method without genetic engineering. The plant's own chromosome sets are arranged in a way that interrupts mature seed formation. The method sounds modern because the words are technical. The basic idea is simple enough to picture. A normal plant has pairs. A doubled plant has 4 sets. Their offspring has 3 sets. 3 sets make reproduction difficult, while fruit growth can still continue after pollination. That is why seedless watermelons can exist at all. They are fruits from plants whose chromosomes allow the flesh to grow while making normal seed formation unreliable. Even so, the inside is rarely completely empty. Many seedless slices still contain small white shapes in the flesh. Those pale pieces are clues left behind by seed development that began, then stopped before becoming full hard seeds. When a seedless watermelon is sliced, the flesh still often shows small pale marks. They may look like tiny white seeds. They may sit flat in the red flesh, soft enough that a person can chew them without noticing. Some are thin and papery. Others are slightly thicker, with the shape of a seed that never hardened. These pale pieces are usually empty seed coats. A seed coat is the outer covering of a seed. In a mature watermelon seed, that coat becomes firm, dark, and protective. Inside it are the living parts that make a seed complete. A mature seed contains an embryo, which is the tiny young plant. It also contains stored nutrients that help the embryo begin growing after it sprouts. The hard outer coat protects those inner parts from drying, pressure, and small injuries. That is what people usually see in a seeded watermelon. The black seeds are mature seeds with hardened coats. They can be dried and planted if the fruit came from a fertile variety and the seed is healthy. Their dark color and firm texture show that development continued far enough to build a complete protective structure. In a seedless watermelon, seed development begins in a different situation. The fruit may still receive pollen. The ovary may still swell. Small seed structures may still start to form inside the flesh. The triploid plant, with 3 sets of chromosomes, has trouble completing the usual reproductive process. During seed formation, the genetic material does not sort cleanly. Many developing seeds stop early. The embryo does not form normally, or it fails before reaching maturity. The coat may remain as a pale outline, while the inside stays empty or poorly developed. That is why seedless watermelon can still have seed-shaped marks. The fruit is seedless in the practical sense people care about at the table. It usually lacks the hard black seeds that need to be picked out or spit away. The soft white pieces are remains of seed development that started and then failed to finish. They are part of the fruit's biology. They are safe to eat in an ordinary ripe watermelon. They are also a useful clue to how seedless fruit forms. The white seed coat shows that the plant did begin the seed-making pathway. Chromosome imbalance interrupted the process before a normal mature seed appeared. A few harder seeds can sometimes show up in a seedless watermelon. That can happen when development is incomplete in an uneven way, or when a small number of seed structures mature more than expected. The fruit is still produced from a seedless type. Biology often works with tendencies rather than perfect emptiness. A field, a flower, and a fruit all contain small variations. Most of the time, the triploid plant makes soft white seed coats. Occasionally, a firmer seed appears. The same idea helps explain why different seedless watermelons can look slightly different inside. One fruit may have many white seed coats. Another may have fewer. Some may be barely visible. Others may stand out clearly against deep red flesh. Their number and size can depend on variety, pollination, growing conditions, and how development unfolded inside the fruit. The important point is that these pale pieces come from interrupted seed formation. They are developmental marks. They are part of the same chain that began with flowers, pollen, chromosomes, and the swelling ovary. A seedless watermelon is therefore less empty than its name suggests. It carries the outline of a process that almost happened. The seed coat formed enough to leave a trace. The embryo inside did not mature into a normal plant-starting seed. That small difference is why the slice feels easy to eat. The fruit keeps the sweetness, color, water, and flesh people want, while most of the hard seed structure disappears from the eating experience. Once this is clear, other strange watermelon interiors become easier to understand. A pale seed coat, a hollow center, a crack in the flesh, or an uneven shape can all come from ordinary growth events inside a living fruit. The inside of a watermelon is built slowly, cell by cell, under the influence of pollen, water, temperature, chromosomes, and time. A watermelon can look perfect until the knife reaches the center. The rind may be smooth. The fruit may feel heavy. The flesh may have a strong red color. Then the cut opens and reveals a wide crack, an empty pocket, or a star-shaped gap running through the middle. This condition is often called hollow heart. The name sounds dramatic, but the cause usually belongs to ordinary fruit development. Hollow heart appears when the flesh inside the watermelon separates as it grows. Instead of forming a solid center, the inner tissue pulls apart and leaves open space. The gap may be small and narrow. It may also spread through the center in a larger split. The flesh around it can still be sweet and normal in color, because the problem is mainly structural. It comes from how the fruit expanded inside its rind. Pollination is one of the most important causes. When a female watermelon flower receives enough pollen, seed development begins more evenly. Those developing seeds help send chemical signals through the young fruit. Plant hormones are part of that signaling system. A hormone is a natural chemical messenger that tells cells when to divide, enlarge, or change their activity. In a growing watermelon, those signals help guide the expansion of flesh around the seed area. If pollination is weak or uneven, the signals can be uneven too. Some parts of the fruit may grow strongly. Other parts may lag behind. The rind keeps expanding around the developing flesh, and the inside has to keep pace. When growth is out of balance, the center can separate. Cold weather during bloom can make this more likely. Cool mornings can slow bees. Cloudy, windy, or rainy weather can reduce flower visits. If fewer bees move between male and female flowers, less pollen reaches the stigma. The flower may still set fruit, but the fruit may begin with a weaker start. That weakness can appear weeks later as a misshapen melon, a smaller fruit, or a hollow space inside the flesh. Rapid growth can add more pressure. After rain or irrigation, a watermelon vine may have plenty of water available. Warm weather can speed development. The fruit begins to enlarge quickly. Cells in the flesh divide and stretch. The rind forms a firm outer boundary around all of it. A sealed fruit has only so much room for uneven growth. If the outer fruit expands and the inner tissues do not fill the space smoothly, cracks can form. The result can look strange because the opening is hidden until harvest. A hollow heart fruit does not announce itself from the outside in any simple way. The surface may carry normal stripes. The ground spot may look mature. The melon may sound full when tapped. Inside, a quiet mismatch has already happened between pollination signals, cell growth, water movement, and tissue strength. The same basic idea can explain some misshapen watermelons. A fruit with poor pollen distribution may grow more on one side than the other. One end may be narrow. One side may bulge. The shape reflects uneven growth from the earliest stage, when the flower first began changing into fruit. Watermelon development is guided by small events that happen long before the fruit is large enough to harvest. Hollow heart can be surprising, but it fits the pattern of a living crop. The flesh is built by cells. Those cells respond to pollen, hormones, temperature, water, and time. The rind protects the fruit, while also holding all that growth inside a fixed boundary. When development is smooth, the center fills evenly. When signals and growth rates vary, the interior can leave a record of that unevenness. This is why many strange watermelon interiors have simple biological explanations. A white seed coat can come from seed development that stopped early. A hollow center can come from uneven pollination and tissue expansion. A misshapen fruit can come from incomplete growth signals in the young ovary. These marks can look unusual because people usually meet watermelon after it has been selected, packed, shipped, and displayed as a clean, finished object. Inside the field, each fruit is still an individual growing body. Some oddities happen through weather, flowers, and development. Other unusual forms come from human intention, as growers and breeders keep asking watermelon to become smaller, larger, brighter, stranger, or easier to sell. Human intention has given watermelon more forms than a single produce bin can show. A shopper may see only a dark green seedless melon, oval and heavy, with red flesh expected inside. Garden catalogues, seed banks, farm stands, and specialty markets show a wider range. Watermelon can be red, pink, yellow, orange, or pale inside. It can be round, oval, long, striped, mottled, nearly black-green, or light green with narrow markings. Some kinds are small enough for one person to carry easily. Others grow so large that lifting them becomes a careful two-handed task. The color differences begin with pigments. Red watermelon carries a strong amount of lycopene, the red carotenoid also found in ripe tomatoes. Yellow and orange watermelons carry different pigment balances inside their cells. Their color comes from inherited fruit chemistry. A yellow-fleshed watermelon can be ripe, sweet, and fully natural within the crop's range of variation. Some older and specialty varieties keep these colors alive because gardeners and breeders keep planting them. A variety called yellow crimson has yellow flesh with a familiar striped rind. Orange glow is known for orange flesh. Cream of Saskatchewan, an heirloom type associated with settlers in Canada, has pale flesh and dark seeds. These names show how watermelon diversity has been carried through regions, families, seed companies, and local preference. Size has been shaped too. Mini watermelons are bred for people who want a smaller fruit that fits in a refrigerator and can be eaten before the cut flesh softens. Many personal-sized watermelons weigh only about 3 to 7 pounds. They are easier to chill, easier to cut, and easier to finish in a small household. Large field watermelons may weigh 15, 20, or more than 25 pounds, depending on variety and growing conditions. Those larger fruits can be useful for families, gatherings, farm stands, and markets where a big melon still feels generous. At the far edge of size selection are giant watermelons grown for competition. Growers of giant fruits choose seedlines known for extreme size, prepare deep fertile soil, manage watering carefully, and often leave only one fruit on a vine so the plant's energy flows into that single melon. Competition watermelons can reach hundreds of pounds under special care. Those fruits are part agriculture, part patience, and part record chasing. They show what selection can do when flavor and shipping are no longer the main goals. Shape can also be guided while the fruit is still young. Square watermelons became famous in Japan, especially as novelty gifts and display fruits. A young watermelon can be placed inside a clear box or mold while it is growing. As the fruit expands, the rind presses gently against the walls of the container. The finished melon keeps the shape of the space around it. The genes of the plant still grow a watermelon. The mold guides the outer form. Many square watermelons are harvested before full eating ripeness because the goal is appearance, storage shape, or novelty, rather than the best flavor. Other shaped fruits can be grown in hearts, pyramids, or special containers, depending on the mold. Rind pattern adds another layer of human choice. Some watermelons have broad dark stripes over pale green. Some have narrow stripes. Some are nearly solid dark green, like black diamond types. Others have speckles, spots, or unusual markings. Moon and Stars watermelon carries yellow spots on dark green rind, with one or more larger yellow patches surrounded by many small ones. To a grower, rind pattern can help identify a variety. To a buyer, it can make one melon look familiar, old-fashioned, rare, or especially attractive. Seed traits separate watermelon types as well. Seeded heirloom varieties may have black, brown, tan, or white mature seeds. Some people prefer their flavor, texture, or history. Modern seedless supermarket types are often bred for convenience, uniform size, red flesh, firm rind, and reliable shipping. The difference is about the whole fruit, not only the presence of seeds. A seeded heirloom grown for a local table may have a thinner rind or a different texture than a seedless melon bred to travel through a large supply chain. Human preference has shaped watermelon into a wide design space. Some choices serve flavor. Some serve convenience. Some serve beauty, memory, display, shipping, or competition. Every unusual form still grows through the same living limits of the plant. A yellow mini melon, a square novelty fruit, and a giant fairground watermelon all depend on warm soil, working roots, open flowers, enough pollen, steady water, healthy leaves, and a harvest time to the fruit's purpose. In a working field, those living limits arrive as weather, soil, water, insects, and timing. A watermelon variety may carry the genes for red flesh, strong rind, good sweetness, or small convenient size. The field decides how much of that promise becomes real. Watermelon is a warm season crop. Its vines grow best when the air stays warm, often between about 70 and 85 degrees Fahrenheit on average. Cold soil slows young plants. Frost can injure or kill them. Before planting, growers often want the soil several inches down to be near 60 to 65 degrees Fahrenheit, because the seed has to germinate in warmth. Germination is the moment a seed wakes from waiting and begins to grow. The seed coat splits. A first root pushes downward. A young shoot lifts toward the surface. If the soil is too cold, that process becomes slow, uneven, or weak. Watermelon roots also need the right kind of ground. Deep sandy soil can work well because it warms quickly and drains easily. Drainage matters because watermelon vines need moisture, but roots can suffer in waterlogged soil. When water fills the spaces between soil particles for too long, roots receive less oxygen. Roots are living tissues, and they need oxygen to keep working. A field that holds too much water can weaken plants, encourage disease, and reduce the fruit's final quality. A good crop often needs about 8 to 10 inches of timely rainfall or irrigation on deep sandy soil. The word timely matters. Water at the wrong moment cannot fully repair stress from an earlier stage. Moisture is especially important before seedlings emerge, during early bloom, and while fruits are enlarging. Before emergence, the seed needs enough water to start growth. During bloom, the plant is making flowers and setting fruit. During fruit sizing, water helps cells expand inside the developing melon. Irrigation gives farmers a way to manage that supply when rainfall is low. Some fields use drip irrigation, where water moves through narrow lines near the plant roots. Other fields may use overhead sprinklers. Drip systems can reduce wet leaves, which may help lower some disease pressure. Overhead water can cool plants and cover a wider area, though wet leaves can sometimes give fungal diseases better conditions. The best method depends on soil, climate, cost, and farm setup. Pollination remains part of the field's hidden machinery. A field with good vines and good soil still needs flower visits. Honeybees, bumblebees, and wild bees move pollen from male flowers to female flowers. If bloom arrives during cool, rainy, or windy weather, bee movement may drop. Weak pollination can lead to poor fruit set, misshapen melons, or internal problems such as hollow heart. The final fruit carries the memory of those small morning visits. Disease pressure also shapes the crop. A grower may choose a cultivar, meaning a cultivated variety, partly because it resists common diseases. Fusarium wilt is one serious watermelon disease, caused by a soil-living fungus that can block water movement inside the plant. Anthracnose can mark leaves, stems, and fruit with sunken spots. Powdery mildew can cover leaves with a pale, dusty growth, reducing the leaf area that gathers sunlight. Gummy stem blight can damage vines and weaken the plant before fruit reaches full size. Insects add more pressure. Striped cucumber beetles can feed on young plants. Aphids can remove plant sap and sometimes spread viruses. Mites can become problems in hot, dry conditions. Farmers manage these pressures through crop rotation, resistant varieties, field scouting, pollinator care, irrigation choices, and harvest timing. Harvest is its own skill because a watermelon has to be picked at the right stage. A melon cut too early may never develop its best sweetness. One left too long can become overripe, soft, or more likely to break down inside. Growers look for several signs. The ground spot, where the fruit rested on the soil, often turns from pale white to creamy yellow. The tendril nearest the fruit stem may dry. The rind surface may look duller. The fruit may feel heavy for its size. Some people listen for a deeper sound when tapping, though sound alone can mislead. No single sign gives a perfect answer. Together, they help decide when the fruit has gathered enough sugar, water, color, and texture from the vine. The supermarket melon represents a chain of successful conditions. Warm soil, steady moisture, working leaves, bee visits, healthy vines, a harvest made at the right moment after the stem is cut. The fruit enters a different world, where its weight, rind, water-filled flesh, and delicate interior have to survive movement beyond the field. After harvest, a watermelon becomes a moving problem. It is large. It is round or oval. It is heavy for the amount of money one fruit may bring. Its flesh is full of water, and that water gives the fruit its freshness. But it also adds weight to every bin, pallet, truck, and store display. A crop like dried beans can carry many calories in a small space. A crop like wheat can be poured, stored, and moved in bulk. A watermelon has to be handled as an individual body. Each fruit has a rind, a shape, a stem end, a blossom end, and a soft interior that can be damaged before the outside looks damaged. This makes watermelon different from many smaller fruits. A box of apples can hold many separate fruits. A flat of berries can be stacked in small containers. A watermelon takes up room by itself. If the fruit is too large, fewer can fit into a shipping bin. If the fruit is too uneven in shape, packing becomes harder. If the rind is too weak, the fruit may crack under pressure. For growers and shippers, the melon has to be more than sweet. It has to survive the journey after sweetness is already set. Harvest crews often cut watermelons by hand. Workers move through the field, separate ripe fruits from the vine, and place them carefully where they can be collected. The fruit may be passed from person to person, moved into field trucks, or loaded into large bins. Every movement matters because bruising can begin beneath an unbroken rind. A hard knock can rupture cells inside the flesh. Pressure from stacking can create soft spots. A crack can allow juice to leak and microbes to enter. The rind protects the fruit, but it cannot remove the need for careful handling. Large shipments often depend on bins, pallets, trailers, and organized loading patterns. The fruit must be arranged so weight is spread safely. A melon near the bottom may carry pressure from fruits above it. A melon against a rough surface may develop scuffed rind. During transport, vibration from roads can add small repeated impacts. Temperature matters as well. Watermelons can be damaged by too much heat after harvest, but they can also suffer if held too cold for too long. A chilled injury may show later as pitting, poor color, or weakened flesh quality. The best storage conditions depend on how long the fruit will travel and how ripe it was when harvested. This shipping reality feeds back into breeding. A melon bred only for flavor might be wonderful near the field and difficult in a national supply chain. A melon meant for supermarkets needs a predictable size range. It needs a rind strong enough for transport. It needs a shape that fits bins and displays. It needs flesh that holds texture long enough to reach the buyer. Uniformity becomes valuable because it helps the whole system run smoothly. If most fruits in a load are similar in size, they can be packed more efficiently. If rinds have reliable strength, fewer fruits are lost before sale. If the variety ripens evenly, harvest planning becomes easier. The market also shapes what counts as convenient. A personal-sized watermelon may weigh only a few pounds and fit neatly into a refrigerator. A larger picnic melon may feel more generous for a gathering, but it takes more space in a truck and on a store table. Seedless types became especially important in many markets because they matched what buyers wanted at the table. That preference changed fields, pollination plans, and breeding goals. Watermelon can feel local because it is tied so strongly to warm weather and summer harvest. A roadside stand melon may have traveled only a short distance from field to table. At the same time, watermelon is a global crop. International agricultural databases, including FAOSTAT from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, track watermelon production across many countries. That kind of record places watermelon beside grains, vegetables, fruits, livestock, and other measured parts of the world food system. The fruit belongs to backyard gardens and farm stands. It also belongs to shipping routes, crop statistics, trade reports, and supermarket planning. A watermelon's journey after harvest shows how much has to work beyond the vine. The fruit must be appealing enough to buy, strong enough to move, uniform enough to pack, and fresh enough to cut open days or weeks after leaving the field. The food system carries the melons that meet those demands, and those demands help decide which watermelons keep being grown. At the store, those demands become visible in small choices. A person may stop at a bin of watermelons and look first at size. One fruit seems too large for a small refrigerator. Another feels easier to carry. A dark green rind may look familiar. A striped rind may look more traditional. A label that says seedless may make the decision simpler before the fruit is even lifted. This quiet moment at the display is part of watermelon history. The shopper is not breeding the fruit directly. Still, the fruits people choose most often create pressure on the whole system behind them. Retailers notice what sells. Growers notice what buyers request. Seed companies and plant breeders work toward the traits that farms, stores, and households keep rewarding. Seedlessness became one of the strongest examples. Hard black seeds are normal in traditional watermelons, and many people grew up spitting them out or picking them from slices. Seedless watermelons reduced that inconvenience. They made the fruit easier to cube, serve, blend, pack in containers, and eat without stopping. That simple eating preference changed farm planning because seedless fields need pollinizer plants and bee activity, arranged carefully enough to set fruit. A choice made at the table reaches backward into the field. Red flesh has also been rewarded again and again. Many buyers treat a deep red center as a sign of sweetness and ripeness. Yellow and orange watermelons can be fully ripe and sweet. Yet red remains the most familiar color in many supermarkets. That expectation shapes what stores stock. A variety with unusual flesh may do well at a farm stand, a specialty market, or in a home garden. A national grocery chain often prefers a fruit that most customers recognize quickly. Color becomes a market signal. Sweetness is measured more directly by growers and breeders. A watermelon with higher sugar, good texture, and reliable ripening is easier to sell. Crispness matters too. The flesh should break cleanly when bitten, with enough cell pressure to feel fresh. If the texture is soft, grainy, or watery without sweetness, the fruit can disappoint even when it looks right. Breeders therefore work with several traits at once. Flavor has to fit with yield, which means how much usable crop a field produces. Disease resistance has to fit with rind strength. Rind strength has to fit with eating quality. Seed traits have to fit with pollination needs and customer preference. Shelf appearance matters because many watermelons are bought before anyone can see the inside. Uniformity helps the system around the fruit. Melons in a narrow size range are easier to pack into bins. They are easier to price. They are easier to stack on a store display. They are easier for shoppers to compare. A very uneven harvest creates more sorting, more waste, and more uncertainty. For farms and stores, a predictable watermelon can be valuable before anyone tastes it. Mini watermelons show another modern direction. They fit better in refrigerators. They suit smaller households. They can be carried more easily from a store or market. A person living alone or a family with limited fridge space may avoid a 20-pound melon because cutting it creates too much fruit at once. A smaller watermelon solves that problem by matching the fruit to the way the people actually store and eat food. Supermarket uniformity can hide the wider diversity of watermelon. Home gardeners may grow seeded heirlooms with black seeds, pale flesh, unusual rind patterns, or older regional names. Seed catalogues may offer yellow-fleshed, orange-fleshed, round, long, speckled, striped, thin-rinded, thick-rinded, small, and large types. A garden can make room for curiosity. A large supply chain usually needs reliability. Both belong to the same crop, shaped by different human desires. Domestication did not end along the Nile thousands of years ago. It continues in seed catalogues, breeding stations, farm fields, produce departments, picnic coolers, and kitchen counters. Every repeated preference leaves a trace. People choose convenience, color, sweetness, size, and texture. The food system responds by growing more of the fruits that match those choices. Once the melon reaches the table, attention shifts again. After people ask whether it looks ripe and tastes sweet, they often ask what this water-rich fruit is doing inside the body. Inside the body, watermelon first behaves like a water-rich food. A fresh slice is mostly water by weight, usually around 90% or more. That is why it feels cooling and light when eaten on a hot day. The water in the fruit can contribute to daily fluid intake, especially when a person eats several slices. The body still handles it as food, with water, sugar, fiber, vitamins, minerals, pigments, and plant compounds arriving together. Watermelon also contains natural sugars. That matters because a food can be refreshing, and still add sweetness to a meal. The main sugars include glucose, fructose, and sucrose. They are dissolved in the fruit's juice, which is why the sweetness spreads quickly when the cells break. Compared with many rich desserts, watermelon is light. Compared with plain water, it brings calories and sugar. That balanced view makes the fruit easier to understand. Watermelon also provides vitamin C, a nutrient the body uses in many normal processes. Vitamin C helps support collagen formation. Collagen is a protein that gives structure to skin, blood vessels, tendons, and other tissues. The fruit also contains small amounts of minerals such as potassium and magnesium. These minerals help cells manage fluid balance, muscle function, and many ordinary chemical reactions. The amounts in a serving are useful, though watermelon is best understood as one part of a varied diet rather than the center of nutrition by itself. The red color brings another compound into the story. Lycopene is the red carotenoid pigment found in red watermelon flesh. It is also the pigment that helps make ripe tomatoes red. Carotenoids are plant pigments that can absorb light and protect plant tissues. In the human diet, some carotenoids are studied because they can act as antioxidants. An antioxidant is a compound that can help manage unstable molecules called free radicals. Free radicals form naturally during normal body processes, and also from things like smoke, pollution, or too much ultraviolet light. The science of antioxidants is complex, so lycopene should be described with care. A red watermelon contains lycopene. That makes it chemically interesting. It does not turn a slice into medicine. Watermelon has another compound that gives it a special place among fruits. That compound is citrulline. Citrulline is an amino acid. Amino acids are small building blocks the body uses in many ways, including making proteins and supporting chemical pathways. Watermelon is one of the better-known food sources of citrulline. The name citrulline even comes from citrullus, the watermelon genus. Inside the body, citrulline can be changed into another amino acid called arginine. Arginine is involved in making nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is a tiny gas molecule that helps blood vessels relax and widen as part of normal blood flow control. This pathway is one reason watermelon has attracted attention from nutrition researchers. The connection is real biochemistry, though the effect of eating watermelon depends on serving size, overall diet, health, and many other body conditions. The rind belongs in this part of the story too. The pale rind has often been treated as waste, but it can contain citrulline as well. That helps explain why some food traditions pickle or cook the rind instead of throwing all of it away. A pickled rind, a cooked rind dish, and a fresh red slice all come from different parts of the same fruit wall. Each part carries a different texture, taste, and chemical mix. Watermelon's health story becomes strongest when it stays ordinary and precise. It can help provide fluid. It can add vitamin C. It can bring lycopene in red-fleshed varieties. It can supply citrulline, which the body can use in normal amino acid pathways. It also contains natural sugar and relatively little fiber compared with many whole fruits. That combination makes it refreshing, useful, and easy to overpraise. The fruit does not need impossible promises to be worth noticing. Its value comes from the same details that have guided the whole journey. Water held in cells, pigments built by the plant, amino acids stored in flesh and rind, and sweetness shaped by long human preference. A fruit that attracts honest nutrition also attracts rumors. And those rumors become easier to sort once the rind, seeds, pigments, flowers, chromosomes, and fields are all in view. Rumors tend to gather around watermelon because the fruit looks so changed from its wild beginnings. A seedless slice can seem too convenient. A yellow center can seem surprising. A square melon can look engineered in a way that feels almost unreal. A hollow space inside the flesh can make a person wonder what happened before the fruit reached the table. The calmer answer comes from the whole journey of the plant. A watermelon is a living crop with a long past. Its scientific name, Citrullus lanatus, belongs to an African plant lineage that includes tough, heat-adapted relatives. Some older forms were likely bitter, pale, or more useful for seeds than for sweet flesh. Ancient seeds from places such as Libya and Sudan show that people were handling citrullus plants thousands of years ago. Egyptian tomb images and burial materials show the fruit entering meals, offerings, and memory along the Nile. From there, the story kept moving through seed saving, cultivation, travel, and selection. Every visible part of a modern watermelon carries one layer of that process. The rind is part of the fruit wall that grew from a flower's ovary. Its green surface and pale inner layer help protect the water-heavy flesh. The red center carries lycopene, a carotenoid pigment also found in tomatoes. Yellow and orange watermelons come from different pigment patterns inside the cells. Their colors belong to real watermelon diversity. A yellow slice has not been dyed into existence. The sweetness comes from sugars such as glucose, fructose, and sucrose, gathered into the fruit as the vine's leaves turn sunlight into food. The crisp bite comes from water-filled cells under pressure. That pressure, called turgor pressure, gives fresh plant tissue its snap. When the cells break, the juice is released. Seeds tell another part of the story. In a traditional seeded watermelon, black seeds are mature structures with embryos, stored nutrients, and hardened coats. In a seedless watermelon, the plant usually comes from triploid breeding. That means it has 3 sets of chromosomes, which makes normal seed development difficult. The fruit can still grow after pollination, especially when bees bring pollen from normal pollinizer plants nearby. Small white seed coats in seedless fruit are traces of seed development that started, then stopped before forming mature black seeds. That makes seedless watermelon a result of chromosome breeding, pollination, and plant development. Its convenience has a biological explanation. Square watermelons also have a simple cause. A young fruit can be placed into a box or mold while it is still growing. As the rind expands, it presses against the container and takes on that shape. The vine still grows a watermelon. The mold guides the outside. Many square fruits are made for display or novelty, and some are picked before full eating ripeness. Hollow heart has its own ordinary mechanism. A gap or crack inside the flesh can form when pollination is weak. Bee movement is limited by cool or poor weather, or the fruit grows unevenly inside its rind. The opening may look strange after the melon is cut, yet it often comes from flower timing, pollen transfer, hormones, water movement, and cell expansion. A watermelon field holds all of these possibilities at once. Warm soil helps seeds germinate. Roots need moisture without long periods of waterlogging. Leaves gather light. Flowers need bee visits. Growers manage pests, diseases, irrigation, harvest timing, rind strength, and shipping demands. A fruit that reaches a store has already passed through many filters. It had to grow well. It had to be picked at the right stage. It had to survive handling, stacking, transport, and display. Then the buyer made another choice, favoring size, color, seedlessness, rind pattern, sweetness, or convenience. This is how domestication continues. Human choices act on living variation. The plant responds across generations because seeds, breeding lines, fields, and markets carry preferred traits forward. Modern watermelon differs greatly from many wild forms, and it remains a real fruit from a real vine. Its history shows how nature and human preference can become joined over time. The final slice still feels familiar. Green rind, pale edge, colored flesh, soft seed coats or dark mature seeds, cool juice held inside tiny cells. Now those simple parts carry more meaning. They hold African landscapes, ancient seeds, Egyptian tombs, pollinating bees, chromosome sets, red pigments, careful harvests, moving trucks, market bins, and ordinary hands choosing what tasted best. A watermelon can be changed by people and still be alive with plant history. It can be common on a summer table and still hold thousands of years inside its rind. The fruit remains quiet, heavy, sweet, and full of water, resting at the end of a long chain of sunlight, soil, flowers, selection, and time.